And since the right characters happen to be at the table at the moment, let's start at higher ed, although I do have a couple questions, at least, I think, in K-12, but which are earlier in the binder, but the right folks are here for higher ed. So let's go to page 41 of the higher ed agenda. No. Let me see. No, I don't want to do that.
I was under the impression we were going through the ones that we could close, right?
Yeah, but, well... Sorry. There's been more discussion since our last meeting, members. I think everybody's been circling around the capital expenditures issue in CSU that got left open. The UC one we closed, but CSU got left open for questions with respect to Fresno and Chico. It's my understanding that there's been a proposed compromise, basically. The assembly version, which had all of them, but planning money only for Fresno and Chico, and for Chico at the reduced square footage suggested by the LAO. Was it the LAO who suggested that the Chico one was too high?
Yeah, correct. We recommended reducing it by 5,000 square feet, and CSU has written a letter saying that they agree with that.
Okay, and then it would be only planning money for Fresno and Chico, while Fresno continues to figure out how to make sure they settle up their athletic field use versus the other. But the planning would be the same regardless. Mr. Lowenthal?
Why would we not just do the full, what we decide for Chico, which would be what the reduce, I think it was...
by 5,000 square feet?
Yeah.
We just said that.
But not just the planning, to do the same thing with Chico that we're doing with Channel Islands, to approve those two and just do the planning for Fresno.
What was in there besides planning for Chico?
Well,
what?
Was that
Mark Whitaker, legislative analyst. The plan for Chico was to fund the preliminary plans and working drawings this year with the remainder of the general obligation bonds, and then in a later year come back and approve construction with either lease revenue bonds or general obligation bonds. So.
When I say plans, are we saying preliminary plans and working drawings, or just preliminary plans?
Preliminary plans and working drawings for a building that's reduced in scope by 5,000 square feet over the governor's proposal.
Okay, and Fresno would be also preliminary plans and working drawings only?
Yes.
That all said, is that a satisfactory resolution for everybody? And Channel Islands, I'm sorry, it was assembly version, which included Channel Islands, which we had all discussed, and I think everybody was comfortable with Channel Islands before. So it's essentially the assembly version, which is the governor's version, except for reducing the square footage at Chico and acknowledging that it's preliminary plans and working drawings only for Fresno and Chico. Finance, yes?
Teresa Gunn, Department of Finance. We're okay with that.
Okay. That said, 3-0 on the 3-2 on the Senate side, 5-0 on the Assembly side. On this, oops, I put it by the wrong thing. Okay. All right. While we're in higher ed here, page 44, the basic skills issue. I think the motion, members, and I don't know how you want to handle these, but is to reopen it because there has been amendments to the bill that was moving on the same issue, which caused this proposal to kind of duplicate a process that would now be in the policy bill. Ms. Conway, this was something you had been involved in, Mr. Huff, with Ms. Liu, but I think the idea was to take it out of the budget bill and allow the policy bill to do its thing. I think both of them created work groups, and having both at the same time. We took our action before they amended the policy bill, but the current version of the policy bill, as I understand it, has a similar work group doing a similar function. I don't know if anybody else, Finance, do you, or Elio, are you familiar with this? We got some calls from the Chancellor's office. Elio?
Paul Steenhausen with the Analyst's Office. The amended Senate Bill 1143, Lou, would require the Board of Governors to adopt a plan on improving student success, including examining community colleges' funding mechanism. It's broader than this budget bill language, but it could serve an important need in case 1143 doesn't make it through the policy process. So we had recommended going with the budget bill language.
But
as
don't
well
they
as support
sort of
for the
contradict?
bill.
If both of them passed, then where would we be? We would be asking them to duplicate what they're doing. I think that's the concern.
We don't think so, because the working group could address both issues. The budget bill language is really part of and subsumed in the broader language 1143. So I don't think they'd necessarily be doing separate tasks. It would be kind of dovetailed.
What?
All right, Senator Lowenthal?
No, to me, I'm not convinced. It just seems to me a duplication of services. It's asking the Chancellor to do a study. I think if I would prefer to go with the policy bill, to put it, at this point. We can always, at some later point, if that policy bill, failed, we could come back to this, or it could come back. But I think right now, the policy bill gets everybody to the table. Basic skills will be part of that discussion. I think it's important not to have two separate processes going on at the same time.
The key is not to have two working groups going on.
Yeah.
I don't know if people are comfortable. At first, we have to get a vote to reopen first. I'm not quite sure we've accomplished that. Senator Huff, you listened to this debate more than I did in subcommittee.
I can't speak for Senator Liu on this, but I think we're going backwards with what you want to do here today. The budget bill language is what's that? Real financial incentive. Yeah, the budget bill language gives a financial incentive that isn't there in the Liu bill that we're trying to substitute it with. Would be. And I can't say that I represent Senator Liu in this because that was our discussion in the subcommittee. But I think if you're trying to incentivize them, we have that with what we were looking at before. We like the Senate approach, in other words.
I think we had already taken the dollar amount out anyway. But what I was hearing was the conflicting stakeholder groups. This is what I was concerned about. Finance, do you have any?
Jane Oropesa, Department of Finance. We would support the assembly version, and we too are concerned with duplicate working groups.
On that basis, do we have votes to reopen? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ms. Conway? I don't know. I don't know, to reopen and then whatever. But, I mean, if we want members, we could reopen it and then try to reconcile the concern. But given that Finance agrees, I'm tempted. Okay, look, on the Assembly side, we get 4-0. How's that, Ms. Conway? To reopen. On the Senate side, 3-2. Mr. Leonard, did you want to make a comment?
Yes. It can't be all that difficult to put some language to clarify that this is not to duplicate efforts, so that we could have budget bill language if we wanted it.
We'd have to revise the budget bill language.
Yes.
So maybe the motion today, if we agree to reopen it, is to then leave it open for a moment, although initially I'm inclined to the Assembly version, but there might be a way it could be revised to not appear to duplicate the policy bill. That's the bigger concern. That we're not putting the chancellor to doing twice what he's doing once.
I don't think that's anyone's intent.
And I don't think anybody wants to do that. And the concern with the language, as I understood it, was the duplication. If there is some alternative version that is a compromise that works, and we could take a minute to chat with Senator Liu. For right now, I mean, the Assembly and the governor are together, and I'm not opposed, but I just don't want to have anybody left out of
Could
doing
you
something.
say something like this only goes into effect if the policy bill fails or something?
Yeah, let's at least look at trying to revise the language so that it's more consistent with whatever they are doing in the policy bill. And if that doesn't work, then we'll default to the Assembly governor version.
I don't know what's so good that we need to bend over backwards to. We have a bill. What is so different that we want to go to all these contortions to?
I think it's the timing, because if the budget bill language says do something by September, do something by January, the policy bill would not go into effect until January, which creates, I think that's what Senator Huff is sort of getting at, is that there's no incentive to, am I articulating you appropriately, Mr. Huff?
Yeah, we should let the ballot.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen. So, sorry. Good try. But for the moment, at least we'll have it reopened, and then we'll see where we get to. All right. It got put on the list, but it really was closed, so it's reopened now, and it'll stay on the reopen list. Okay, 45. Oh, dear. Elio, this is the bog waiver thing, right?
This is the proposed budget bill language for the financial aid categorical program, which would change how some of the monies are allocated from based on participation rates in the Board of Governors fee waiver program to participation rates among students in federal Pell grants. And the intent would be to create the intent by the Senate would be to create a stronger incentive for colleges to get students to fill out a federal application form whereby they would get not just the fee waiver but also be eligible for up to $5,500 in Pell grants. And you left the issue open.
Are you aware also of a policy bill in this arena?
Yes, there's Assemblymember Portantino has a bill, AB 1997, which was recently amended and would establish a pilot program, I believe, for 10 colleges to identify and disseminate best practices around improving financial aid awareness and participation by students. So it's a pilot project. It's not changing the incentives at all.
Madam Chair,
Pardon, Mr. Nielsen?
what's the cost of the pilot program? Is that way above what we're even considering here, the pilot program? If the bill went, would that cost the state more money?
The bill includes language that encourages to the greatest extent possible that colleges seek federal funds and private foundation funds. If that doesn't happen, then there would be cross pressure on the general
It
fund.
creates at least a presumption. Would that be a good word, that the state will fund it at this level?
Well, it presumes that it will cost money, and the hope is that the money would be acquired through non-general fund means, but if not, the bill's silent on exactly where the funding source would come from.
Thank you.
So, wait a minute. But this is the one where if you're not doing this, you would lose money. What are we trying to get districts to do? We're trying to get districts to encourage people to fill out FAFSAs and get Pell Grants, right?
That's correct.
And
Currently,
so if a district,
among a number of colleges, the emphasis is on getting students to fill out this short form to get their Board of Governors fee waiver, which is an admirable goal, but the intent of the Senate's language, this was in Subcommittee 1, was to get districts to focus on a greater prize, which is the federal funds. And the way to get that is by filling out a FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. And when they do that, they not only get the fee waiver, they get consideration for a lot more money, which can help improve success rates or the chance of success for students if they have more money and don't have to work as much.
Aren't we leaving about $500 million on the table through Pell Grants?
That's the estimate, yes. About up to $500 million is left on the table by California community college students because they're not filling out their FAFSAs.
But basically, this is a major policy change. It's not affecting the general fund budget. I understand out years, and we want to look at impacts of everything that we do on federal funds, but it's not. The budget bill language is really just a policy question, as I see it. Is that not the case?
Well, I think a case could be made that it's how money is allocated, which is budget, and certainly a budget, if it's designed correctly, the funding mechanism creates the right incentives to get the recipients of that money to behave in a way that's best for the state. So you can argue both ways. But our view and the subcommittee's view was that it's appropriate that it's a budget action, just on how that money is allocated, changing that basis.
But you create a lot of winners and losers here, and that's the finance?
Gina Pesa, Department of Finance. That would be our concern, that those districts that are doing a better job in drawing down the federal Pell Grants would receive more money, and those that are not, well, we need to figure out what they need to do to improve their rates.
To improve it,
would
yeah.
get less money and have less ability to actually help the kids draw down the monies. So there has to be an answer here. We're not sure that this is necessarily.
But you might be able to work it out in the policy bill? Finance, since you will have. I mean,
we can look at
I mean, I don't know what's in the policy bill, but maybe Mr. Blumenfield's right. This is beyond our.
Can somebody please tell me who the actual loser is? Is it just the ones that failed to apply?
Well, you could have. You could be a loser if you have a lot of Pell eligible students,
right.
But you're giving them these 2-page forms to fill out. You're not telling them about the
So if they
FAFSA.
don't
And you can
apply,
also be a loser if you just don't have as many needy students. But in that case, you wouldn't need as much financial aid money because you don't have as many the workload.
So the
that
only
others
loser
do.
you really have are the ones that fail to fill out the forms. I mean, in the schools that don't encourage that. So, I mean, that's the loser we're talking about.
But is there enough money to go around the way this is set aside for them to become winners if they were to do it? I think that's.
there probably isn't sufficient money. It's a small pot of money that was allocated to every district to improve the drawdown rates.
So as of what we call the current year, which is now the prior year, everybody was getting this money?
Yes, they were getting a minimum of $50,000, and then it increased based on enrollment. So everybody was
By
getting
enrollment, not based on
FTES, by the BOG.
by FTES,
yeah,
period.
it's BOG. Yep.
But not FTES BOG students?
Yes. So they were getting a minimum of $50,000, and then they had an allocation above that for the larger colleges. So if
based on poverty, based on number of students who need assistance with financial aid?
Based on BOG fee waivers, not Pell.
Which are the folks who, in theory,
Right.
should be getting the FAFSA, get the
And
part
the
where we want
Pels,
them
right.
to fill out the Pell.
Right.
But I'm also concerned this is the same money those districts need in order to have a counselor available to help them fill out the FAFSA.
That's what we understand the money was being used for.
But if we take the money away from the districts who have the highest percentage of Pell Grant users, then there'll be nobody there to help them fill out the form.
If they have the most participation of Pell Grant recipients, they would get the most money. I just want to clarify
Well, but
something.
if they have the most eligible Pell Grant folks,
But if they're not if they're not getting the students on the...
But if they lose the money while they're trying to gear up, let's just presume that they want to get the Pell Grant thing done. In the meantime, they would get less money with which to help people fill out the FAFSA.
Well, we had recommended, originally the Senate language had proposed to start in 10-11, and we had compromised language saying, wait, that's not, we need to give districts time to rethink their financial aid operations. Well, if we need to do that, then let's try to do it in the policy bill. Mr. Blumenfield moves the Assembly version.
Thank you.
I give up. Anybody? What do we got? Assembly version, 1, 2. I can't see Miss Skinner.
She's good.
3. No. Everybody likes the Senate. All right. I give up. 3-2. 3-2. I quit. All right. Page 4. Okay. General government. I mean, with the fees. All right, page 4, Office of Planning and Research. Is everybody now comfortable that the Senate version preserves all necessary and appropriate personnel and functions?
We are so moved.
Okay, so Senate version? That's Senate version. Mr. Dutton's an aye. Mr. Huff is an aye. 5-0-2 and 5. Okay, 5-0-5-0. Senate version is approved. All right. I hate to make the wrong people come back up. I was going to go back to this one. Which one?
Which one?
I wanted to go back and talk about the quick map.
We can talk about it. We just wanted to close it as part of all of the big 98.
Districts are dying. Jack sent the email. There's 170 districts.
When we get to it, we don't have a problem substantively. It's just closing out the overall 98.
All right, health. Oh, where are we? Health. All right. Page 9. Oh, hospital fee? Oh, yeah, okay. Finance? Yeah, I think the suggestion is Assembly version essentially is to let the discussion of this go through the policy process.
John Wunderlich, Department of Finance. At this stage, that seems reasonable given that we are currently working with the Hospital Association on next steps to address the CMS concerns. But we are committed to getting a fee approved that's workable and that will still achieve the general fund savings.
Us too, but we think it may take you till August to figure out the policy, and we really, really want a budget in July. All right, so Mr. Blumenfield moves the Assembly version. That basically is kick the policy issue to policy. There are several bills moving on this issue, and it is a bit convoluted by virtue of the CMS issue. Finance supports us on this. Well, I mean, it has to get done by August, right? Finance?
In terms of,
I guess
I'm not aware that August is a deadline
well, the
as far as the
relationship
federal
to the
government.
waiver, I guess, is the question.
This isn't directly related to the waiver. This is on a separate track with the federal government.
All right. But we need people to keep doing it, and for us to sit here and try to figure out that policy is probably more than any of us. Yes, we do need it sooner rather than later, but we also don't need to hold up the budget for it because it could take longer than that. All right. Mr. Bloomfield has moved the assembly version. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-0 on the assembly side, 3-2 on the Senate side. All right, to policy. All right, page 17. Same. Oh, we have a conference compromise. Somebody's floating around.
And it's a handout.
Handout.
Everybody has it. It's on the table.
Take it that everybody's seen it somewhere.
$7 compromise language.
The document, folks, is Senate dollars compromise language. To do what? Elio?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Farrah Brock with the Legislative Analyst's Office. The language, it was a compromise worked out between county representatives and the Department of Health Care Services, and the language would primarily do three things. First, it would clarify the data that's being used to establish the base for county administration funding. It would also require the departments and the county representatives to work together to make sure that they really understand what the components of the data are that are being requested, so there isn't any of the confusion which led to this proposal by the administration. And third, the department will also provide some additional information in their budget package every year so that we have a better understanding of what is being proposed. The Senate dollars that are being proposed, this would take the administration's proposal to reduce the county administration base budget by about $88 million total funds, and it would reduce it to half, so it would be $44 million total funds, $22 million general fund. We believe this is what we recommended earlier in conference committee. We are recommending the Senate approach. We believe it's a reasonable middle ground to an issue that we had a hard time finding clarity on and really understanding if there was double counting going on or not in the base process. So we thought this was a good approach to take.
Okay. Any members, questions, comments? Mr. Huff?
Say I'm willing to go. I think Senator Dutton is too on this, but we would prefer to have more cuts, just so you know.
More
cuts.
Cuts,
We
yes.
were
Cuts
good with the governor's numbers.
Got it. I don't know what we can cut, but we'll keep looking. Finance?
We're supportive of the trailer bill language, but still support the proposed reductions if may revise. And that was the $43.9 million general fund.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. But it would have done what? This would make, this is the one where if you take the money, they can't redetermine people?
Right.
This is the one where if you don't give them this money, then it may cost us more because they won't do redeterminations?
It's certainly a possible outcome. There's no certainty as to whether or not that would occur, but if the counties don't have enough money, they may not have enough staff to do the redeterminations on time.
That's the issue. All right.
And according to the department at present, all counties are certifying that they are meeting the standards.
Yes, but that's with the money, not without it. That's the point. All right. All right. So Mr. Blumenfield moves the conference compromise, Senate dollars, and the trailer. Mr. Dutton is a no. 4-1 on the Senate side. Mr. Nielsen's okay. Ms. Conway's okay. 5-0 on the Assembly side. All right. What page was that? I don't even have these marked right. All right. Moving right along. All right. Department of Public Health. Pages 24 and 29 of the health agenda. Is the first of a series of issues on this agenda, members, that relate to the governor's recent proposal to withdraw the water bond from the 2010 ballot. Given that the budget had spent from this bond, because it was presumed that it might pass in the budget year, we are now reopening all of the water bond issues and pulling those items out. So this is the first place that shows up. Ms. Skinner, you wanted to use your. Sorry, did I miss something?
Yeah, with two more.
I don't have any more. sorry. All right, yeah, sorry. These were not on the open items list, member. That's where the confusion is. It is pages 24 and 25, 24 and 29 of the conference agenda. We had taken them up in resources. Some of you may have your notes in the resources because we had done these as conforming to however we did the water bond, and we did that action in resources. But the first place where it appears is here in public health, because these were programs that were being funded with water bond dollars. So we need to reopen the items on page 24 and 29.
I'll make the motion to reopen, and then also, once reopened, to move the assembly version.
Yeah, and the assembly had not done this. You had not done Nielsen?
Madam Chair, I'm fine with this action, but I must, and it's unrelated to the budget directly, but an observation. As we consider the extension of the water bond coming in August when the legislature reconvenes, the biggest issue is not reopening all the negotiations. No. If we're to do that, then we're not going to get anywhere. If it's just whether or not we vote to extend it, then that's cool. But I will certainly be arguing against reopening all of the issues that were settled in that bond.
Agreed. This is only reopening the budget expenditures that were made from that bond, which now would not be eligible to be made till after voters vote in presumably 2012. This is just on not reopening any policy issues, as far as I understand it, only those items where there had been expenditures approved in the budget from that bond, which is presumed no longer to be occurring in the budget year. So next year, the year after, get to make those expenditures again. All right, so Mr. Leno moves to reopen. Hearing no objection, 5-0, to reopen. And the motion, then, Mr. Leno moves assembly version, which did not fund these projects to begin with. Okay. On a 5-0 vote, that will be approved. Okay. Page 33.
That's both 24
and 29. Yeah. 24 and 29. Reopen to assembly. So that was today, the 7th. All right. Now, page 33. There is proposed compromise trailer bill handout someplace. Elio, you got one of these? Or seen it? Intent language?
We have not seen the proposed trailer bill language.
Oh. I think I don't. This is intent language for something that. Elio, why would we do this? This is is this trying to amend assembly trailer language? Governor and Senate had no action here. So this is assembly trailer language that is intent language. You still don't. Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Meredith Burden with the Legislative Analyst's Office. It appears that there is a conference compromise that would propose intent language to use some of the funds from the hospital fee for children's coverage to be used to expand rather than supplement services. The governor's proposal had initially proposed to put backfill general fund and Medi-Cal. Different actions were taken in the Assembly and the Senate with regard to these funds, and this language would say in a better budget time that these funds should be used to supplement rather than supplant funds for coverage for children.
It's a very minor, thing. It's intent language saying that in the future we want the money to be spent the way it was intended on improving healthy families. I don't know why this should be controversial.
If that was in the bill, why do we need? I mean, was that in the original bill? Finance?
The original bill designated $80 million per quarter for children's health services, but it did not specify whether that would be used could be used to supplant existing or specifically would be used for expansions.
And so because we've been broke the last few years, we've been using it to offset, not to expand, obviously.
That's the governor's proposal, yes.
And that's how we've been doing it.
Well, this is the fee again where we're still waiting to get federal approval.
Oh, right. This is tied to that.
Madam Chair, the only concern I've got, I don't have any trouble with providing programs for children, but my God, we're having a hard enough time funding what we've got. Now you want to go, I don't care if it's even a dollar. And maybe that's part of the problem. Too many people here think, well, it's not that much money. Well, guys, I got to tell you something. You get enough, that's not that much money. Pretty soon it equals collectively big money. And so this here, this bill originally was put in, we supported it. Didn't have a problem with it, but now you want to expand it into increasing program, and I can't even fund the programs we have.
Well, I think the intent language actually acknowledges what you're saying. It's saying in the future, when we're in better economic health, when we have the money, then we'll put it toward its intended purpose. But it's not saying to do that now in our difficult economic times. It's nothing. It's intent language in the future when we have a better budget time. It doesn't, in essence, it's making your point, because otherwise it would be saying it's our intent to do it now in these difficult times. By differentiating the future when we're in good times, it's stating exactly your point, that in the current time, when we're in difficult times, this is not the time to.
Well, let me make another point here, because I've been sitting here patiently watching some of this stuff here. We've got a $19 billion problem. So far, what I've seen about $7 billion in things that may be questionable as far as revenue credits towards it. So that leaves you $12 billion. We've done about $2 billion in cuts. I haven't even figured out how in the heck I can balance the budget yet, and yet you're worried about a couple of years from now expanding the program. I'll deal with it then. I think we need to be focusing on how are we going to bring these services down to a level we can afford without totally destroying people in the process. And instead, everybody wants to start thinking about more program enhancements in the future. I can't even fund what I've got now. So I wish we would focus a little bit more on that, Madam Chair.
It would be good. But nonetheless, they're trying to get to the point that the finance has a confusion with supplant and supplement, and I take it that the author, because in the subcommittee, wanted to make it clear that in the future it is his desire that it should be supplement, not supplant.
Well, but in the future, the legislature can make that decision then. I mean, they may have a whole set of different circumstances they're going to be dealing with. Starting July 1st, this lack of a budget is costing us over $50 million a day. Okay? Right now, it's day 7. Okay? Day 7 of holding the California taxpayers in hostage. We're writing checks that they can't afford to cash. That's $350 million right now. Okay, right now today. Tomorrow it's going to be $400 million. And you're worried about this program. We could take the savings from, if we do the budget on time or at least get it done now, you'd have the money to do this program. So that's where I'm getting my frustration a little bit here.
The frustration is well felt by everyone, which argues, of course, to accept the conference compromise trailer bill language and close this item so it's one less thing on our future agendas. Mr. Blumenfield moves the conference compromise, for better or worse. All right, Mr. Lowenthal, Mr. Dutton's a no, Mr. Huff's a no, Mr. Lowenthal, where'd you go? I need him back. Mr. Nielsen's a no, Ms. Conway's a no, okay. Who's a no? Mr. Felipe's a no, we're done. All right. Okay, so it's 3-2 on the Assembly side and 2-2 on the Senate side, pending return of Mr. Lowenthal. Page 36. This is Senate. The suggestion is Senate version. It conforms to the earlier items, right?
Page 19.
Yeah. It conforms to page 19 that we already did, right? Senate version. Anybody have an objection? On page 36, fund shift.
So moved.
All right, on a 5-0 on the Senate side, 5-0 on the Assembly side, that will be approved. Page 37, it also conforms to the prior item, Senate version, conforming to page 36, 5050. Let us change topics. General, oh no, where are we? Oh, Mr. Lowenthal, page 33, we had a motion while you were temporarily out of the room to approve the conference compromise. Yes.
Thank you for asking for my reject.
Yes, on a 3-2, that will be approved. Okay. We're now up to local government. Somewhere. Where's that, under general government? Where's that? Oh, we have a local government section. Okay. I just have too many papers in here to find it. Page 11. Ms. O'Malley and her brilliant compromise. Have we worked this through with all the whomever we need to ask? This Open Meeting Act. This, members, is actually a savings, Mr. Dutton, of money on the mandates, I think, right? Ms. LAO compromise. LAO?
Marianne O'Malley with the Ledge Analyst Office. Yes, the LAO compromise is to recast these provisions as best practices and to require that local governments announce what policies they're going to follow in order to comply with Proposition 59.
Right. My notes from earlier conversations on this is that finance is okay with the LAO compromise?
Jeff Carasone, Department of Finance, yes.
Okay. Is everybody else now comfortable with it? All right.
We are not.
You are not?
No, we are good.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's Mr. Dutton moves the LAO compromise. It's 5-0 on the Senate side and 5-0 on the Assembly side. Okay, page 11, done. Good work, somebody. Okay. Okay, now we're in resources. Oh, yeah, no, we don't want to talk about 36. Resources. Do we have that language? I was trying to get... Sergeants, I need the language both on that one and on the toxics. There's two. Members, we've talked about these before. I don't think we had actual language. We do have actual language on what the biomass proposal is, but I realized after I got here that people may not have seen it. So at a minimum, I wanted to hand it out and make sure everybody understood what the proposal was, because it was sort of vague the way we had it. And then if there were any appetite for it, we can let you sit on it for a minute and see if we come back to it. If people haven't seen it before, I don't know if it had circulated, but I wanted to make sure everybody had one. You have one? I don't know if folks have had a chance. I mean, I appreciate the concept is what I had articulated before, but I had asked staff to make sure we had actual language for people to look at. It is the proposal was to provide a loan from the Renewable Resources Trust Fund for biomass, agricultural biomass in the Central Valley. I think on the condition, if I find it correctly. That, wait.
Get rid of some intent.
Yeah, the point is to provide an incentive to minimize ag burning and then to allow these funds to be used in a way that would promote the ag biomass as a substitute for ag burning, particularly in the area where that burning is essentially illegal under current law, I think.
Well, Madam Chair, it goes a little further. I can't get beyond the intent language. 41606 is the intent of the legislature to eliminate air pollution from open field burning. In other words, no open field burning. Now, I'm all for biomass. I developed a biomass plant years ago. But this language goes too far for me to accept. Now, we need to look at it more carefully. The other provisions, scanning them, doesn't look all that bad. But elimination, I certainly would not support that contention or that assumption.
I think there's existing law with respect to trying to phase out ag burning, if I recall, but I don't remember the details of that. So I'm fine with people taking another look at this, and just because I know the language wasn't handed out till now, so if that's what we need to do, I'm okay with that. But I wanted to make sure everybody at least had what we specifically are doing. That's fine. Let's just let people take a look at it and come back to it. Just make sure we wrote it right. All right. Page 19, which is a reopen, members. This is not, you will not show it on your open list because it is essentially a reopen of water bond expenditures, similar to our previous discussion. This one is the one that includes the Red Bluff, and there were several projects. Finance? Yeah. Right. Oh, okay, we took all of these as a total, I think. Can we take them all as one item like we did before? Where are they? Let's see, 19, 24, and 29. Oh, this was the ones we did earlier. Okay. Yeah, page 19 of the resources agenda. We had closed on the Senate version, which, no, we didn't. What did we do before? Finance? Or, no, sorry.
Yes,
we did a compromise, right? Is that what happened?
That's correct, Madam Chair. The action on the Red Bluff was to accept the Assembly version, which was funding for the project, and on the funding for drought relief and water recycling, it was a LAO recommended conference compromise with some modest language or modest appropriations for planning purposes.
Finance?
Matt Almy, Department of Finance. As I understand, the committee's actions is to just merely make a technical adjustment to reflect no expenditures for the water bond.
Yeah, basically. But we have to move to reopen the approvals of these projects. Which is unfortunate. Yeah, Mr.
If I might make a request, if we could leave it open just a bit, I'd like, as far as the Red Bluff diversion project, in that that's state and federal and it's all a go, it's shovel ready to move. Could we take just a brief time to analyze if 1E money would be applicable? I have an opinion that says 1E money could be directed for that purpose. We might be able to consider that in the budget. Could we just look at that as a possibility?
If it's not already allocated to something else, I don't know. I have a note here that said Prop 84 question mark, but because we had denied it initially in the Senate, so. But the only question on that, Mr. Nielsen, I guess everybody'd have to answer is, it's my understanding there was actually an allocation for this project in the bond.
Yes.
So if we were to spend from something else and do it, then what happens to that when the bond does pass?
Well, you just have language that says that this provision non-operable if the bond passes. Wouldn't you do that?
Well, but the bond wouldn't pass for 2 years and you just spent the money, right?
No, that's right.
Yeah, just from a technical perspective, to the extent you
could loan it and repay it,
eliminate funding out of this bond, there would be no expenditures in the budget for Red Bluff. On Proposition 84, the only pot, as far as I'm aware, that's eligible to be used for that project was the unallocated portion of the Integrated Regional Water Management pot, the interregional pot, and as I understand it, that pot's been fully allocated. As far as Proposition 1E, I can't speak to that. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know what's available there. Do you have a specific part of 1E that you thought it might be eligible from? Or?
We just did a cursory look, and the advice to me that was possible, if we could just take time to do a little more analysis of it. That's all.
Elio?
Yes, Madam Chair, Mark Newton, Elio. Just a technical clarification. The November water bond did not explicitly include funding for Red Bluff. It was a very narrowly prescribed funding provision where the Red Bluff diversion project neatly fit in.
I see. Okay. That's what it was. It would fit within the category. All right, well, let's, how about we reopen all of these issues, members, for the moment. We all agree to reopen all of them, 5050. And let's reclose all the ones minus Red Bluff at however you make technical adjustment to say zero funding. My notes say drought relief minus 400K or Senate minus 400, and on the recycling it's Senate minus 400. I don't know how you do that, but you figure it out in reconciliation. Bottom line, the items for fund drought relief and water recycling would go to zero, and the Red Bluff would remain open very briefly while somebody looks at 1E to see if, given that it has federal match, and maybe the wording could be, one might look at whether you could almost loan something to the project from 1E that could be repaid from the water bound should it pass in 2012. I don't know. I mean, only in the interest of getting the project happening sooner than 2 years from now.
Just one more point. We will look into the eligibility of 1E, but even if it is eligible, just wanted to make the obvious statement that the DWR has a comprehensive expenditure plan for various flood projects that provide flood protection throughout the Central Valley. To the extent you allocate money for this project, that by definition means less money available for other flood projects.
Well, that's why we need to know. I mean, that's the look. I think the concern with this one is that it's an ongoing project that we're already spending to do. And if assuming there was zero funding from this bond because this bond isn't happening, I guess my question would be what happens to the project? Does it just stall out for 2 years? Or is there some patchwork way of keeping it functional and keeping people working on it during the 2 years that we delay the bond. That's really sort of
Mr.
the
Holtz
question
just
of the day.
suggested we consider Prop 13,
That's
if
the
that might
question
be a
of the day.
fit, too. There's a Prop 13 bond.
I don't know if there's anything left in 13, but that's the question. And maybe it's a lesser amount of money than what was proposed here, which would have been enough to finish the project. The question is, what do you do for a bridge, given that it's already under construction, and you sort of don't want to get into the cost of stopping construction and starting it again? Right? Okay. Okay, so we'll leave the Red Bluff piece open, and we'll, I assume, 5050 to zero out the other two. Okay. All right. All right, page 23. A brilliant effort on somebody's part that apparently doesn't actually work, right? Is that the deal, LAO? Our brilliant effort to take money from something, but doesn't sound like it works legally or something. LAO?
Yes, Madam Chair. There's sort of legal issues here as well as issues of how the financial markets would perceive the legislature's action. In terms of the legal issue of whether the legislature could redirect Williams Settlement monies from the Electric Power Fund to the General Fund, Legislative Counsel has opined in a very definitive, sort of unequivocal way that these Williams Settlement monies are General Fund fungible and could be redirected to the General Fund. The issue, though, is that the Treasurer's Office has raised some concern, and we defer to their view on this issue, that the financial markets may be concerned with the legislature sort of tinkering with the Electric Power Fund monies, which the bulk of the monies are used to repay revenue bonds that were issued to support the state's purchases of energy during the energy crisis. So the concern is that the financial markets may react in a way that affects the state's credit rating. So it's a weighing of a legal way of achieving general fund savings, $21 million, but at a potential cost or risk of how the financial markets may perceive this action.
If they perceived it, what's the risk? $21 million is a lot. There's a certain amount of risk one might take. What's the risk?
That's right. I have my colleague Jason Cisney, who is our office's financial market expert, that may speak a little more clearly on this issue.
Specifically on the risk in the marketplace, the whole DWR revenue requirement structure is predicated on a lockbox type structure where investors have invested money in the revenue bonds because there's a lockbox on the Electric Power Fund. To the extent that money that has been deposited in Electric Power Fund now is being grabbed and used for other purposes, that compromises the lockbox, and therefore compromises the cost of borrowing money and could potentially raise costs. I would also differ with the LAO that we don't think that this is a legal slam dunk by any means. There are legal risks as well as these policy risks as well. The AG's office is somewhat has a different perspective than Ledge Counsel does, as well as some DWR attorneys.
All right, so the Attorney General and the Treasurer are both nervous about this. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody?
They have pointed out some significant legal risks.
Okay. Mr.
Jason Cisney, LAO. What the risk would be, you wouldn't know it till you tried it. It's very difficult to predict.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, investors are risk averse, and so it's possible it could happen, and it wouldn't matter much, and it's possible that there would be a good number of fairly important investors outraged. Difficult to know until you try it.
All right. Well, we're trying not to take any more risks than we have to these days. We got enough risks.
Don't you think we ought to be a little adverse to risk with
we got
money?
More of those than we know what to do with right now.
I don't want to experiment with their money, I don't think.
Yeah, all right. It was an interesting savings, but Ms. Skinner moves the Assembly version, which meets the governor's needs. Good try, though. On a 5-0 vote, the Assembly version will be approved. All right. Page 27. Is there a way to do this that doesn't hurt agriculture and some, I don't know what to do here. Or is there a way that, oh, there's a proposed compromise, somebody. The assembly version with trailer bill language, suspending the registration of the thing that is supposed to be a substitute but is possibly worse. LAO, you want to, or somebody explain this? Well, also, what happened? Did she have that? Oh, yeah.
Madam Chair, we're not, I've not been familiar with this particular compromise language. So this issue was put into conference, or the department's budget was put into conference because of the policy concerns about the registration of methyl iodide due to environmental concerns with that registration. So presumably this compromise addresses that policy concern.
It was this question of this theoretical substitute for methyl bromide being more dangerous than the methyl bromide. But there is existing stocks of methyl bromide they can continue to use, and they can continue to use it under US EPA extensions. But does anybody remember what the current date of expiration on methyl bromide is? Oh, is it that soon?
Isn't it supposed to be until the stocks run out, and that's a couple of years?
Okay, the stocks, until the stocks are running out, or if US EPA grants an extension. The language suggests, or if US EPA grants extensions because they figure out the same thing we did, that their proposed other substitute is possibly more dangerous than the original methyl bromide was, which is the concern here. This does ask that there be a independent review on this methyl iodide, and it basically doesn't ban it. It just suspends registration for 2 years while people try to figure out if it's as dangerous as some science purports it to be. Has US EPA actually approved this stuff yet? Yes. Finance?
US EPA has not approved pesticides' use of this. They're going through that registration process at this point, and that's part of the. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's still pending registration.
It's part of the deliberative process that they're doing. Collecting public comment, and then once that public comment is gathered, pesticide regulation will submit that plan to US EPA for review and approval. And so there still is a deliberative process that needs to occur. Now, I believe that process would be more brief than the 2 years that are outlined here. But a lot of this does,
But as long as we have methyl bromide stocks that would last those 2 years, we'd be okay. I mean, you don't want to leave people with a gap where nothing's approved to use.
I think you'd have to change the language here then to provide that, Madam Chair. You're going to have some kind of language that still allows the use of methyl iodide if methyl bromide, for some reason, falls off the map sooner. I don't think this language accomplishes that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't allow methyl iodide to be used.
I think that's my point, that I would argue that we should keep that option available for that use if methyl bromide sooner than 2 years is found not to be able to be used.
But if in between this methyl iodide got approved and the review that's requested here were done and people believed it wasn't as dangerous as current information suggests, I suppose. I don't know how to think about that.
Again, it devolves into a policy area. We would only point out, too, that the continued use of methyl bromide does continue to deplete the ozone. And so there's environmental risks on either side.
Yeah, but the other stuff is neurotoxic. We're not interested in killing people in lieu of the ozone thing. Mr. Hoff?
Wouldn't this be better decided in a policy committee?
Well, there's that.
Because there's no budget on this thing.
This is of huge consequence, and I would indeed echo that sentiment that this better be dealt with in a policy committee. There's extensive significance here. For one, being the strawberry industry in California, there would be none.
The issue is timing. I mean, given that this is a budget, and I have some sympathy for the policy argument, but the notion is to not allow the department to register this stuff, at least during this budget year, while people try to figure this out. This language had suggested that we suspend the registration for 2 years, but given that we're doing it in a budget, maybe we should just do it for 1 year, and then possibly that meets Mr. Nielsen's concern. I'm reasonably convinced we have enough methyl bromide to go 1 more year. And in the meantime, we would expect US EPA and the departments. I mean, what we do want is the language trying to get the review of this stuff and to find out how bad it is or not or whatever. And we do need that to be done in the budget year because of the fact that this is moving on a track with US EPA. Does that help anybody get there, Mr. Blumenfield? I don't know.
I would move that 1-year moratorium in the language.
Quick question. So the department has a policy. They followed that. It's stricter than EPA, and yet somebody still has a problem with this. I mean, I'm not on the policy committee, but I'm just wondering, where is this reluctance coming from?
I think the concern is that our department may be tried to be forced into using it by US EPA, and we want to make sure that our department does its own analysis because there have been all these scientific issues raised as to the possible neurotoxic effects.
So you think they co-opted their own policies that they have? Because my understanding is that it was more detailed than EPA, more stringent.
US EPA.
Yeah, ours was more stringent than what.
Right, and ours hasn't approved it yet. I mean, US EPA hasn't even approved it yet, so.
That's correct, but Mr. Huff's point is apt, yes.
So they're already?
There are, no. The proposed plan that is currently under public review and comment.
But that's US
EPA has set standards that are more stringent than what US EPA guidelines have laid out. But that plan has yet to be submitted to US EPA for concurrence.
But California Department of Toxic Substances and Control has not done its own independent, Department of Pesticide Regulation has not done its own analysis separate from US EPA. I mean, generally speaking, California does have different standards sometimes than US EPA. Mm-hmm. So.
But I believe that they have, and they have submitted their
Our department has?
Pesticides, yes, and that is what is currently under public review.
Well, that's what's under
pesticides review. Applicability and application and method by which this chemical will be used. They gather public comment and then submit that plan, once it's been publicly reviewed within the state, to US EPA for approval. And that is the process that we find ourselves in currently.
And by even a 1 year, we are preempting that process. Why should we do that? I mean, we have these processes, there's studies, there's scientific review, they're looking at the efficacy, they're looking at the health problems. Why would we interfere with that process? They may find that this is not acceptable.
Findings of our hearing that was held on this is that the department was ignoring independent scientific evidence of the neurotoxic nature of this proposed chemical.
And we're not familiar with that.
And I think as they were doing that public process, they were not paying attention to some of the scientific data.
Well, I would argue maybe they weren't agreeing with the scientific data based on other scientific data.
But if they're responding to public comment, they should respond to it.
That's we leave the process go, they will be able to.
The only final point that I would make on this is we would need to be careful to understand how this trailer bill potentially conflicts with any sort of federal law. To the extent that the state is directed to extend the application and approval of this, it may run afoul of federal law. And I can't speak to whether that's accurate or not. I would just raise that as a caution.
Yeah, this stuff is all international treaty-related stuff, right? The biggest concern is that we at least, I don't know.
We don't need to do anything.
I mean, I think what at least members in our house, is this where this came from, was from the Senate? Yeah, it was the concern based on hearings that I think a policy committee did hold, but in an informational basis, not on a bill basis, because it came up quickly and that this stuff was moving very quickly. The request came to put it in the budget year because this process was moving and there was a fear that they would proceed to using it without enough independent scientific study, basically.
Madam Chair, I'd speak on behalf of Mr. Blumenfield's motion of the one-year moratorium. There are, I think it's some dozens of Nobel Prize-winning scientists who have spoken of the concern not only neurotoxicity but also of the carcinogenic nature of it. So there's a real issue here. I think the way this trailer bill language is worded is such that there is the allowance for the continued use of the methyl bromide while we have this moratorium for the year to make a determination. And 50% of the strawberry production, I'm told, already is using alternative methods anyway. So you've got only the other half of the industry that would be making use of the methyl bromide during the year's time. So I think it's a good compromise, and it's not as if there's not a serious health concern here.
All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Conway.
To quote Senator Lowenthal earlier, I mean, this is policy, and I'm really troubled by this, especially putting a ban. If it's not even being used and the process is moving forward, I don't understand why we would want to get in the middle of that. I understand safety, and I get all that, and I was not privy to any of the information. I'm thinking out loud, which probably will get me in trouble, but I don't know why we would ban something when this study is happening. And
well, I think what we're saying is, don't register it in this year till you do these scientific studies and bring that information back to the legislature is actually basically
Couldn't we just amend that?
Well, it says suspend for 1 year.
Couldn't we amend the language?
It doesn't say ban, it says suspend.
Excuse me, amend the language to say that would be suspended registration methyl bromide pending the completion of California Department of Pesticide Regulations thorough review, considering all scientific evidence. You'd have to hearken to the actual statutory and regulatory words, but you could say that not just 1 year or 2 years, but simply pending the completion of the DPA review.
I mean, there is a review, but what's being requested here is I think more of a report to the legislature that is clear that it includes possible dissenting views. It may be that the department was moving it on one track and folks think the dissenting views are there, and there is concern that there be an opportunity for the legislature to engage at a policy level. And unless we get the studies back and unless they hold off on approving it, that won't happen.
I think
it's just not going to happen in this legislative year to get the policy piece. You'd have the information back by next legislative year, especially if we only suspend for 1 year.
Well, I'd argue rather that
I get it.
Language should simply reflect pending the completion of the scientific review by DPA and California Department of Pesticide Regulation and their final decision. That would be what I would suggest. That doesn't allow it until such time as a full review and all information considered. You could even require reporting to the legislature as to the progress.
Well, I think that this says as a condition of lifting the suspension and registering it, that you report to the legislature scientific review panels. I mean, I think that's what the language is sort of getting at, although I think it's asking for more of the department than what their current registration process would do, and I think that's the bigger concern. Ms. Skinner?
There seems to be a bit of confusion. Right now, methyl bromide is being used, bromide. So what this would allow is for methyl bromide to be continued to be used. So in that respect, strawberry farmers would not be being put at a disadvantage because they would be able to continue to use the chemical that they're now using as a fumigant for the various soil nematodes and such, right? Well, because they are at risk of being forbidden to use methyl bromide due to the ozone issue, and it is an international treaty, which the U.S. is party to, which had a date for which methyl bromide was to no longer be in use. So what this is really asking is to allow U.S. EPA to give, in effect, the state an extension so that we use down our stockpile of methyl bromide before we register methyl iodide, so that we can continue those studies around methyl iodide. So since our farmers are using bromide now, it doesn't seem to me to be near as yes as the discussion is indicating.
I'm just speaking for the farmers, and it does appear to be that to them.
Except that they're going to get to continue to use that which they're
Methylbromide.
using now,
But
which they're
we would
used
be
to.
doing that anyway, whether we vote on this or not.
Not necessarily, because
There are legal
yes, because it's true. Because the EPA has to grant an extension in order to do so.
Madam Chair, this is getting beyond my
Way
mass.
past.
I don't understand half what we got talking about here, and that means it probably does belong in a policy committee, and I just don't understand why we're going down this path now. It's
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to close it. The 1 year, I mean,
not
it did
closing
come
it
up.
about just rejecting it for now. Let the policy committee do their
Well,
work.
I think the policy committee won't be able to deal with it in the current
They can do it under
year,
urgency.
is what I'm concerned
I
about.
thought
Well, but it
Senator
won't move
Nielsen
that
offered
fast.
a decent compromise on it to where they'd have to have the scientific study in. That seems to be what we're concerned about. And then it keeps us out of the way, but lets it follow the process in place. And they're not going to be using it, as Assemblyman Skinner said, because it wouldn't be used until we follow the protocol in place, which may or may not comply with our fiscal year.
I get the concern, but this does require them to make sure we get those studies before they start registering it, and I think that's the biggest concern. Mr. Lowenthal, it was your subcommittee, but
It seemed to me what Assemblymember Skinner was saying made sense. What I don't understand is this does allow, while the study's going on, this does allow farmers to continue to use methyl bromide. Question is, if we don't request this, if we don't do this, barring action in the interim, methyl iodide will become legal for growers to use after a 60-day comment period ending June 29th. Is that not true? And so
that was the concern. At the time that it was done in subcommittee, that's why it was done in
Is that still true?
There is a fundamental point that we don't know what U.S. EPA is going to say. They can say, nope, tomorrow. Then methyl bromide's gone and methyl iodide's gone. And
well, and that's what we're trying to protect against. That's what the whole point here
the
is.
state of California cannot dictate what EPA does. So we can't. We can do 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but methyl bromide can be banned tomorrow.
Well, I think California had a separate law banning methyl bromide, which we were trying to make sure we extend. So that was.
Well, it still begs the question. We don't want to be in a situation where we don't have something for the strawberry farmers and the others that are using methyl bromide. We're operating on the assumption that we have up to 2 years supply. But
That's why I amended it to 1 year, so that.
But even with that, if EPA steps in and says no, we're only by the grace of them already, because we're beyond the original cutoff date, from what I understand, of the international treaty. So I think, speaking from a grower's perspective, they want to know what the alternative is, because any business has to look down the road. They're not just looking like we do, kind of hand to mouth. So I would, at a minimum, we ought to hold this open and find out what the consequences are from the industry. The danger of doing policy in a budget setting is we do not get the benefit of testimony to know what are the real impacts. We're thinking money. Well, actually, no, we're not thinking money here.
No, this is more department responsiveness and in making sure that the legislature has all the information necessary should a policy decision on this be necessary during the budget year. And if we don't get these scientific studies and we don't get some of this other information, I think you're going to have a lot of folks caught in the middle of this war. And the rest of you weren't here. Mr. Nielsen missed it because he left too early, but I remember the methyl bromide war. And you really don't want to do that again. And it was a big fight around the banning in the first place. And I think the concern right now is that we be able to make sure that people are allowed to use the existing stocks of methyl bromide because we have this concern about this proposed substitute. So anyway, I get the concern if people figure out that there is a different way of doing this, but for right now, I hear enough votes to close on the compromise. Mr. Lau?
I just wanted to see if we could get some confirmation with regard to the comment that Senator Lowenthal had made, that if we don't take any action, that 60 days after the end of public comment of June 29th, that methyl iodide will be used.
That is not my understanding, Senator. My understanding is that the 60-day process ends on June 29, 2010, at which point Department of Pesticides Regulation will submit their plan for the use of methyl iodide to US EPA for review and approval.
Mr. Leno moves the conference compromise. I give up. Mr. Blumenfield already did. I'm sorry. I get the concern, but I don't know. 3-2, I assume? 3-2, 3-2. Just to close it. All right. Green chemistry.
Which one? Which?
I was prepared to move the assembly version, but I don't know. Where are we now?
Is it item number 30?
I'm sorry, the conference compromise for 1 year. It amended to be 1 year, not 2, on the prior item. Toxic substances, page 30. Finance. Oh. You're still, let's see, you want the money. We all agreed with the money.
It's our understanding that there were some questions regarding the department's ongoing
Yeah, I
implementation.
think the
of
Senate
green chemistry.
subcommittee held this open because, or pushed it in the conference because we were having trouble getting their plan.
A spending
It's my
plan.
understanding they have that now, and
Correct.
the
We've
subcommittee
submitted
chair
that.
and folks are satisfied with that, so we were prepared to move the assembly version, but
We're going to hold it just one more time.
the assembly now wishes to hold it open.
Fiora wants to keep it open.
All right. All right, page 37, the Delta Stewardship Council. Is there any objection to the Senate version? This is the one where we tried to conform to their existing practices. Finance, you're okay? Finance is okay?
No concerns.
No
I'm sorry, I missed the item.
Pardon, the Delta Stewardship Council, page 37. Senate version. Mr. Leno moves the Senate version. Finance is okay.
For the record, we still haven't seen the specific language, but in concept, we have no concerns.
You can help them draft it on the specific part.
Good.
You're a no? Okay. Ms. Conway? You're a no. No. Okay. On a 3-2 vote, that concept
We are
will be
again
approved.
using the budget to force policy, but
We just want to protect the money against conflict of interest problems. I mean, I get it, but it is just a protection in this case. Yeah. One more that members, I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to look at this. I had it handed out earlier. We do now have language on page 26. Sorry, going backwards in resources. This is the cap and trade issue. Trying to get rid of all these policy issues that are lying around, honest, everybody. This is, I'm not sure anybody had seen the language. We had talked about this issue earlier. We hadn't had actual language in front of us. So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at it. If not, I'm okay with that, but just want to make the point.
So why are we doing this in budget? I mean, this is policy. This is like the third or fourth, fifth item that we've done. It's been more policy than it has budget related. Does somebody have an agenda?
This goes to the ARB issues that some members have raised over time, and I think it was unanimous in subcommittee.
Well, no, I agree with they've got some problems with the ARB. You also got with Department of Toxic Control. You got the same kind of problem with them too, but
and public health and a few others. Yeah.
That's right. And so, the cap and trade issue is one. I mean, I sat on energy and listened to the presentation by CARB, and frankly, even Mary Nichols said we shouldn't be proceeding going forward on a go-alone basis. Now, this doesn't say anything about that.
Well, this is trying to pause it while they try to figure things like that out.
We shouldn't probably even go forward with it. From a pure economic standpoint, this is a budget committee, and that's the reason I'm looking at the economics.
Well, that was, I think that was the purpose of this language, at least to the limited degree that it was possible for us to do in the budget, was to kind of put a pause button.
This isn't dealing with this. This is dealing with environmental. This isn't dealing with the money. budget.
Well, it deals with the ability of CARB to move forward with the cap and trade policy. But I'm happy to have everybody look at it.
Well, how about economic impacts as well? Okay, because that's really what we should be doing, because right now that's exactly what our problem is. Well, I am reading it. It says an environmental assessments, but what about economic assessments? Because that's the problem we've been having with CARB. So,
Well, if I may to the chair.
Mr. Nielsen.
It's a problem of just right now. Here we got it. Now, this I can read.
That's fine. I'm not. No, but that was my question. My sense was that people had not read it. I wasn't trying to actually close it. I was trying to make sure people had it because we had talked about it earlier and nobody had read it. It's similar to the earlier one. It just had not been passed out. I forced people to get it to us so we could actually look at it today.
Thank you.
And to the extent people are not comfortable, I'm not pushing too hard. I just wanted to make sure everybody got it out there and had a chance to look at it. So that's fine. Page 38, there is one more. Oh, there's an errata sheet. Sorry, I missed this one, members. Page 38, errata. State Lands Commission. There is a proposed conference compromise to reappropriate some money. LAO.
Yes, Madam Chair, Tiffany Roberts, Legislative Analyst Office. The State Lands Commission has requested funding to fulfill the state's obligation to pay a proportionate share of hazardous waste remediation costs at Selby, California. Specifically, those funds would be used to pay for additional soil de-acidification projects, and those activities are required by the Department of Toxic Substances as well as required by a 1989 federal court judgment against the state and two private parties. $261,000 covers the existing outstanding liability. We find that amount to be substantiated and have no issues with it.
And this is a reappropriation, then, members, instead of new money, but we need to meet our legal obligations. Is there any objection to the proposed compromise, which is partial? What is it? Okay, it's reappropriating $261,000 toward those ongoing costs. Hearing no objection on a 5-0 vote, that will be approved. Okay. All right, transportation. Last but not least, are we now ready to close?
Yes.
On high-speed rail? Do we have a compromise, I think, of some sort? Sergeants?
What item is that?
17, 18, 19. It's everything that is left in transportation, which would be all high-speed rail-related issues. Pages 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. All in one large lump. Budget bill language. The proposed compromise is down the right-hand side of the document, members. In some cases, it's Assembly side. In some cases, it's Senate. Others, they are as modified. There is a reduction in one of the Senate expenditures, if you will. And then there's some technical language fix. DOF, are you okay with this?
Mark Minot, Department of Finance. We're okay with all the compromises except we continue to oppose the 25% contingency language.
Where's that one? Is that this one? This one. Okay. Let's see.
And
we did allow, it has more flexibility than the original one did. Try to address some of the concerns that both you and the Commission may have had. All right. Now, Senator Lowenthal moves a proposed compromise. There any objection? No. Mayor, no. Mr. Nielsen's a no. Mr. Dutton's a no. Mr. Huff is a no. 4-1 on the Senate side. 3-2 on the Assembly side. Okay, that closes pages 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, basically all of the remaining open items in transportation. Members, I don't know if there are any, as we continue to deliberate through what remains. I would just, if there are any other things like what we brought up today where there are, specific language now that we did not have before, if there are issues that folks have been talking about that you want to have clarity from finance or LAO on, now would be an opportune time to ask any and all of those questions. Education strikes me. Is Ms. Soropesa still here? Did she take off on us? Sorry. Yeah, that's what I get for doing that. Oh. Just on the education one, because we know most of this has to wait until, maybe Miss, yeah, there you are. Okay. Most of this has to wait till we resolve the larger 98 picture, and it all sort of falls into place then. But to what extent do folks see issues here that could be done outside of that context, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. One, we had considered FCMAT, maybe, possibly some of the categorical issues. 3632, obviously there's been a lot of discussion on that. LAO, do you have any updates on that? I've heard folks talking about possible compromises in there, but you're still meeting, right? I'm just trying to... All right. I just think we need to keep moving on some of these more difficult ones and keep the meetings going. I know we've talked to various folks are talking to various stakeholders and real districts and trying to figure out impacts and possibilities on how to move this. But some of these things have to start to come together here.
Right.
If we're going to get out this month.
Jennifer Kuhn, Ledge Analyst Office. So I think it would really take the direction of the committee to ensure that work groups were being established and sort of had clear guidance on moving forward. So I think at this point, these open items, which essentially are all the K-12 items, absent a few pieces of language and federal funds issues that were addressed during the first few rounds, it is sort of waiting for direction, whether that would be mental health or mandates. To build the Prop 98 package. Obviously, that's interacting with your revenues, potential realignments. But they are major issues, and at this point, I think there's not formal work groups established to proceed forward.
We do have formal work groups in corrections. It's wrong cast of characters to ask, right? Our finance, what's happening on the corrections type proposals?
I believe there was a meeting late last week, but I'm actually not sure if anything was resolved or if any progress was made in that meeting, but I can get back to you.
Okay. All right. I think we need people getting back to us on, if you look at what's left, I'm trying to flip through what's left on the I get to get rid of the transportation one. I'm so excited. But the ed one, general government, we're now down to a couple. All right, that's not so bad. Health is what it is because we're sort of trying to all figure out the federal questions and some of the things that go with that. Local government, it's just revenues. So public safety, the big one is corrections, 3632. Finishing off this resources madness, whatever is left of that. And then, we're at the big question marks here. Which we need to, find some resolution to soon, which is, how much are we spending and how are we going to function in 98? And I think we're almost to basically that stage. So,
Madam Chair.
We know other leaders are meeting. Mr. Nielsen?
I want to compliment you and Assemblymember Blumenfield on keeping the conference committee working with dispatch. One of the challenges now, these whatever working groups, they've got to be reporting now. My own goal is to get this budget passed, a good budget, by July 15th. We dare not languish ourselves into August or September or October. So that being the case, we need to be reaching closure on things, whether we agree or not, and I appreciate that you're moving us in that direction. These working groups need to report forthwith.
especially on these bigger issues. Senator Dutton?
Well, I concur, just a reminder, but it's the numbers I've been given, it's $52 million a day. So, the sooner we deal with this, the lesser problem we have. But right now, we're creating more of a problem than what we're curing just because we're delaying so long on making some of these tough decisions. And by the way, these are decisions that I have no doubt that none of us really want to make for the most part. So I agree with Assemblymember Nielsen. I think the quicker the better, and whether we agree with him or not, we just got to we gotta have closure.
Yeah, tear off the Band-Aid. All right. I think the big ones that are out there is this corrections and discussions of possible ways of doing business differently with local, it's kind of state-local fiscal relationship, as well as, how to get savings long-term in corrections. Corrections, IHSS, 3632, those are the big ones that strike me. And then you have your generic 98 mess, which includes the sort of flexibility questions, the 3632, which I already mentioned, and some of the federal funds issues. And if we can at least get work groups on these federal funds issues and some of the categorical questions, which are sort of outside of what's the true number, because those numbers aren't, the number will get plugged in when it's come in. But the question of what belongs in or out of flexibility, the questions of how to move 3632 over the long term, and the question of, and then what possible savings are legal and obtainable within IHSS, I think are all kind of the big ones, beyond what I presume the health world is doing whatever it does to try to do their Medi-Cal federal magic thing that has to happen to make all of that come together, because that's a lot of moving parts that are going to be in one big action, I presume, toward the end as well.
The few
nursing homes.
The few others that you might consider that you could think of either part of your Prop 98 package or as subgroups that would feed into a larger Prop 98 package would be child care and mandates, and potentially some special ed issues.
Okay. All right. So that said, members, we remain upon call of the chair. And try to get these reports back to us as much as possible. We'll try to keep everybody. Everybody needs to be sort of on 12-hour notice or something. We'll try to give 24 when we can, if we can figure out that. But if something comes together, members, we just need to come back together and do it. It's kind of, as Mr. Nielsen's pointing out, I think. So we need to, keep kind of pushing and working in groups on trying to resolve, especially these ones where the cuts require changes in policy. I mean, we're all at that stage. There aren't a lot of cuts that are just change a dollar number things. These are all like, what's the policy we're pursuing that will allow us to spend within reasonable means, and how we design that in both a legal and actually obtainable way is the challenge of the week. So that said, nobody else. Mr. Lowenthal.
Yeah. I would just like to concur with Assemblymember Nielsen in terms of the urgency, the need to keep this going forward for all Californians to make sure that we do our part to get a budget done in the next week or so. And I support him.
Okay. So, note for the record, we are all here, and we will continue to be here until we get this done. On that basis, we're adjourned for today.